Hello everybody, this is Gregory with 5-Minute Catholic Apologetics and Living, where 5 minutes of your time may get you to the divine. Today we're going to review infant baptism and give some small sacred tradition proofs and some big sacred tradition proofs of how it existed since the time of the apostles. Now before we begin, let's start with a prayer. Nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritui Sancti. Amen. Gloria Patri Filio et Spiritui Sancto, secutor in principio, et nunc et semper, et in saecula saeculorum. Amen. Sometimes I say I'm going to put a banner up here to another episode that's related to it, but for this one for sure I will, because early on in this channel, and this channel's been around a little over 3 years, I did do an episode on infant baptism. Later I also did an episode on whether baptism should be done by immersion or sprinkling. So I'm not going to touch base on those two things much in this episode, but to be fair, there are scriptural proofs for infant baptism. Now, if you look at the Acts of the Apostles, for example, nowhere does it explicitly say that children were baptized. But you see, like, for example, in Acts 16 and other places where the apostles, and this is mostly Peter and Paul, are baptizing people. They're going to baptize them, they say their households. And so when you look at the Greek, the Koine Greek that these books were written in, that St. Luke wrote it in, the word for household is different than the word for servants, because sometimes the Protestants will say that, it means they're servants, or it means they're other people in their family. No, but there's a different Greek word for servant. And the word that you see used in Acts of the Apostles when they're baptizing their household is the Greek word that has to do with the extended family, encompassing everybody that's actually under that house. And there wasn't mass infertility during this time, so the understanding is it would be done by children, or done for children as well. You also just look at what baptism meant. And baptism was kind of a new covenant understanding of the circumcision, right? The circumcision, that was a covenant agreement done starting with Abraham about here's an outward sign that you're in this relationship with God. And so it would make sense that they would baptize infants as well to get them in that relationship. Also, it would make sense because you can see clearly in the Gospels and throughout the New Testament that baptism saves. Baptism saves. I mean, it specifically says that you must be baptized. So it wouldn't make sense that parents who themselves were going to be adult converts, right, would not baptize their kids. But you can look at two other examples. So one is Justin Martyr. Justin Martyr, we have an episode here on him. He's one of the apostolic fathers. In other words, he is somebody who was trained by the apostles. Polycarp of Smyrna is another one. Clement of Rome is another one. Ignatius of Antioch is another one. These are apostolic. So they knew the apostles. And so Justin Martyr in his writing, and a lot of his writing has survived. Again, as I mentioned, we have an episode on him here. If you want more on that information, I'll see if I remember to put the banner up here for him. But in one of his writings, he talks about how he met, and this was written about 130 AD, how he met women that were baptized by the actual apostles. And so if you think about it, when this was written, it was in like 130 to 150 AD, most of the apostles, aside from the apostle John, were martyred by at least 65 AD, that they had to be kids. They had to have been kids to have been baptized. And we do have an episode here, like what happened to each of the 12 apostles, how they met their martyrdom. Spoiler alert, John was the only one who was not martyred, but the Roman emperor did try to kill him. You can listen to it in that episode. But so these women were likely baptized by the apostles because they were giving eyewitness testimony that they were in fact baptized by the apostles. And if you look at their age would be they had to have been very young, given that all the apostles were dead, aside from John, by more or less 65 AD. The other one is that there was a council of Carthage, that was done in the early 300s, before Constantine had legalized the Christian church. And in this council, it was right after, I should say. And in this council, they had discussed baptism, about making it official that baptism should be done 8 days after birth. And again, going back to the Old Covenant, 8 days before you were circumcised. And the council voted unanimously no on that, because you don't know if the baby's going to live 8 days, right? Makes sense. Baptism saves. Today we live in this time, it's like, oh, I just had a kid. Yeah, we'll wait 9 months. I mean, not even waiting, not even the most egregious one, of course, is I'll let my kid decide. But we talk about that in that episode. Like, I'll let my kid decide when they're older if they want to be baptized. No, I mean, if you talk to Baptists or anybody like that, just understand you are going against the thread of Christian history. All through Christian history, we've been baptizing infants. All through it. Anyways, so at this point, early 300s, they voted it down. So we know that at least by the early 300s, they were doing infant baptism, because there was a council that was just addressed, and one of these was the talking points, and we have the minutes for it, that they were talking about, let's officially make it 8 days. So we know they were doing it in 300 AD. But if this is like the first actual record, it's similar to like the sign of the cross. We know that it was Tertullian, early Christian writer. He's not saying Tertullian because he did end up having some unorthodox thinking, but he documents that the apostles were doing the sign of the cross. Right? So even though we don't have like the actual writings from like St. Luke saying in the Acts that infants were baptized, where there's smoke, there's fire. And since Catholics, we're not literalists, where it has to be specifically for us to believe it, you look at the references in Acts of the Apostles. You look at what Christ says about the importance of baptism. You look at our Judeo background, and then you look at what Justin Martyr said, and there's other examples. You can clearly see that infant baptism was being practiced in the very early church. And if you don't believe me, ask the Orthodox, because the Orthodox do it. And the Orthodox give all the sacraments of initiation to children, to very young children. That includes confirmation and even Eucharist. Trying to break up a little piece. So, if you don't believe the Catholics, go talk to the Orthodox. Guys, post in the comments. I'd love to hear from you on your take on infant baptism. Do you agree or disagree? Protestants, Catholics alike, whatever. Until next time, take care, God bless, and pray.